Husband caught in a love triangle involving a celebrity and a mysterious stranger, which sounds like the kind of headline my clients beg me to kill before breakfast, and yet here I am. I'm the one living it, and I'm the one who drafts those crisis memos. Hi, I'm Tamsin, I'm 33. I'm a crisis communications manager who gets paid to pour cold water on burning reputations, and the day I realized my own house was on fire, I was sitting at our kitchen bench rehearsing language for a tech CEO's values-aligned departure while my husband texted someone a photo of his wrist and wrote, "Same time, same signal," like he was scheduling a kidney heist instead of an affair that came with a theme song. Before all of this, I believed I understood narrative. Pick your protagonist, define the stakes, frame the backdrop, offer contrition if required, ship it with a photo where the eyes say responsibility and the jaw says resolution. It's neat work for messy people. But it turns out the mess expands when the person who taught you tenderness starts curating a parallel life with a woman whose face lives on billboards, and with someone else whose face I could never quite catch, a ripple at the edge of every picture, a shadow that knew how to smile. I met Jamie 7 years ago in a green room that smelled like coffee and terror. He was a producer then, clever with soundboards and softer still with musicians on the edge of breaking, the kind of man who could coax a chorus out of a throat that had turned stubborn. I was the woman in black with a lanyard and a calm voice and a stash of aspirin, a fixer with a spreadsheet and a belief that logistics could be a form of love. We married in a hall that used to be a train station and promised each other plain things. Hold my hand when it storms, tell me when you're scared, don't use silence as strategy. 4 years we were embarrassingly good. Shared playlists, shared passwords, shared arguments that ended with someone grating cheese over forgiveness. If you'd told me then that I'd someday type the words celebrity mistress into my own notes app, I would have laughed and told you my life was solid enough to hold a chandelier. The day the famous woman walked in was a Tuesday, which is when ridiculous things happen in my world because Mondays are too obvious. Her name is Valentina Reed. You know the type even if the name doesn't ring, platinum album, cheekbones that could sign checks, eyeliner like a legal limit. I met her at an awards rehearsal, all spine and sunglasses, the agent a pace behind like a spad execution. Jamie came over to calibrate her in-ears and I watched her watch him with the practiced ease of a person used to choosing anything she wanted from a menu no one else could read. They were professional, they were swift, and then she asked his name. It is almost always the question that changes rooms. He said, "Jamie," and her mouth did a small thing like a private hello. I don't believe in love at first sight, but I do believe in recognition at first sentence. There is a flavor of attention that says, I have found my next shore. I clocked it the way you clock a smell you don't yet label as smoke. I filed it next to the other notices in my workhead, stage change at 14:05, security wants an extra wristband for the choreographer, someone has lost a shoe that costs more than my rent. The rehearsal went long, the night ran longer. Valentina nailed her call time, nailed her song, nailed her quote on the carpet about the gift of audience, and then she vanished into a car that wasn't hers like celebrities do. I slept the sleep of a person whose only worry that day had been a fog machine set too high. 3 weeks later, Jamie said, "Do you mind if I take a late session?" This was not unusual, sound lives at night. He came home at 1:20 a.m. with a smell that wasn't perfume so much as air that had been inside rooms where only beautiful people are allowed to exhale. He put his bag down gently like men do when they've been carrying something that isn't theirs. I asked how the session went and he smiled and said, "She's trying something new," and I pretended that she was a pronoun with no biography. My job is a cathedral built from other people's lies, so you'd think I'd be faster at spotting one in my own pew. But love trains you to prefer footnotes to subpoenas. I ignored the first bracelet I hadn't seen before, thin silver, a small star. I ignored the new habit he had of deleting call logs the way some people wipe crumbs from a bench. I ignored for exactly 1 week the glitch in our bank account, a charge from a flora and fauna conservancy that turned out to be a cocktail bar in an alley where bartenders refer to themselves as alchemists. I ignored until I couldn't, the way his thumb hovered over his screen like there were landmines under the glass. The break happened like this. A PR junior under me forwarded a batch of photos for a media plan, behind-the-scenes shots from a cause event we'd helped sponsor. I was skimming them for clearance issues when a frame stopped me. It was a blur, 2 people half-caught in a doorway, late afternoon blown out behind them. But I knew that jacket. I knew the way that hand wrapped around a paper cup. Jamie, head bent, laughing. And beside him, not quite facing the camera, a set of sunglasses hooked to a collarbone like punctuation, Valentina. I zoomed in like a cliché. In the glass door behind them, a reflection nobody meant to capture. A third figure, not close, not far, standing just inside the light, a slim shape in a storm gray hoodie, the chin lifted, the posture a question mark that somehow read as certainty. The caption on the photo, Power Trio. You know the feeling when a too bright light floods a room and every dust mote becomes a confession? That was me. I closed my laptop and looked at the kettle like it knew the future. That night, Jamie texted at 10:13, running late. Don't wait up. He came in past midnight and stood in the bedroom doorway as if the doorframe could hide him from litmus tests. Good day, I asked, and he said, long, the way someone says true enough to become truth, and then he peeled off his shirt and I noticed the faintest smear of glitter near his collarbone. He does not do glitter. He does not go places where glitter is issued at the door. I went to the bathroom and stared at our 2 toothbrushes, and that old joke about any third toothbrush being an admission tried to march through my head, and I told it to sit down. If secrets are rooms, I have spent my career learning how to walk through them without touching the furniture. I made tea and waited for the second line of the lie. It didn't arrive. So I did what I do when a client is lying to me. I made an evidence file private without drama. I started small, screen time tallies, habitual routes altered, receipts cat-footed into the gloves compartment of his car. There were Ubers that began 3 streets over, studio bookings that didn't match the invoice trail, a charity party where his lanyard said +1 and mine said staff, and we didn't stand together all night. There were lyric sheets with marginalia in the sharp handwriting I'd seen on 1,000 fan autographs. There was a playlist on his phone called Low Low full of songs about leaving. I invited my sister Eva over to watch bad television and we ended up watching me instead. How honest do you want me, she said, which in my family means she will be soft and brutal in equal measure. As honest as gravity, I said, and she nodded. His humming a different chord, she said. I don't know if it's her or the idea of her. I said, there's also someone else, and that's when I told her about the reflection in the doorway and the sensation, new and old at the same time, that I was sharing my husband with a person whose shape kept slipping at the edges. The mysterious stranger entered our house the way mist enters a room. If I'd tried to hold them, I would have just come away damp. The first time I heard their name was through someone else's scorn. A stylist I know said it with a laugh that had thorns. Lark, she said, as in the bird and the joke. Lark, who wrote songs other people sang, ghosted verses like sighs, never put their face to their work. Lark, who loved ruins, who supposedly wore the same grey hoodie every day like a monk of apathy. Lark, who had just produced an acoustic session of Valentina in an abandoned church, a video that made grown women send heart emojis to each other at midnight. Lark, who liked to stand in doorways. I googled like a teenager and learned almost nothing, a handful of credits, a photo that could have been anyone, a quote in a blog about the morality of melody, which is the kind of sentence that only means something if you imagine it does. I went to the source, Jamie's phone, but the lock screen had learned a new habit, not sharing. One night, after a long week where I'd managed 3 resignations for 3 different people without anyone throwing a chair, I came home and found a note on our table in his print. Went for air. Back later. I stood in our quiet kitchen and looked out the window and saw my reflection and behind it a smudge of movement, our neighbor's cat performing the theater of being a cat. I laughed, more a cough than anything, and that's when I heard it, the second phone. The tiniest buzz from inside the pantry, like a bee with manners. I opened the door and there it was, slipped between sacks of pasta, naked of case, gleam dimmed. He had a second phone. He had put it in with the flour. I touched it like it might bite and the screen twitched to life, a new message pulsing. S, are you alone? And then a second later, V, same place. And then, because the universe enjoys emphasizing its jokes, L, 5 minutes. Bring the melody you can't let yourself sing. I had imagined that seeing was the worst part. It turns out reading is worse. Words are a loft you can fall from again and again. I didn't reply. I am not a TV character who texts strangers from other people's phones. I put it back where I found it and closed the door slowly like I was tucking in a bomb. I sat at our table with my back to the pantry and stared at a bowl of oranges like they were moral teachers. I tried to decide whether I was more humiliated by the celebrity or by the stranger. I realized the humiliation was democratically distributed. What burned wasn't that they were famous or obscure. What burned was that he was building a chord out of 3 notes and didn't invite me to hear it first. I didn't confront him that night. I practiced. I took my brutal tenderness to a quiet bar and wrote sentences that sounded like someone who doesn't cry at their own commas. When he came home, I asked about his walk and he told me the night smelled like rain with a straight face, and I hate that I catalogued the lie with appreciation for his phrasing. I slept beside him the way you sleep next to a river, aware of the current even when your eyes are closed. What changed everything was that my job, oh irony, put Valentina in my calendar with a problem that required discretion. 2 months after the abandoned church video, her tour sponsor threatened to pull a 7-figure deal over values misalignment. The values being misaligned, a rumor about a married producer and a shadowy third person, and a house in the inner west where the blinds didn't meet in the middle. I took the brief because I'm paid to be constitutionally unfazed. She arrived 40 minutes late to my office in sunglasses the size of intention and sat like a queen who'd agreed to be mortal for an hour. "Tell me what you need to make this go away," I said, and she smiled like we were women on a ship together. "A time machine," she said. Then she lifted her glasses, and the eyes belonged to a person who had not slept without consequences in weeks. Or a story they can forgive. We spoke in code because that's how this works. You give me metaphors, I give you mitigation. I asked whether there was a pattern or a burst. She said both. I asked whether the producer was going to claim he'd been working the whole time. She said he was. I asked whether the third person would speak. She said they never do. I was careful. I didn't say Jamie's name. I didn't say Lark. I didn't say the things my mouth wanted to say, that I had a pantry buzzing with proof, that I had a bed that felt like a waiting room. I kept it clinical and kind. She cried, beautifully, like rain through an expensive screen door. I gave her tissues and the number of a therapist who saved me when my mother died. She left with a plan and the kind of hug you give someone you might need in court later. 2 days after that, an envelope arrived at my office with my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside, a photograph printed on matte stock like a secret. 3 people on a footbridge at dusk. Jamie, back turned, hunched into a hoodie he never wore with me. Valentina, head thrown back in laughter, her mouth a cufflink of light. And between them, not quite touching either, the stranger, Lark. No face, just the angle of someone looking up at an airplane cutting a line into evening. On the back of the photo, a sentence, "Truth is a triangle, 2 of the points think they're the base." No sender. No return address. I put it in a folder and labeled the folder kitchen. I know, tell him, stand up, break the 4th wall of your life. I planned it like a mission. Saturday morning, pancakes as neutral ground, Eve on standby with wine for after. He beat me to it by 3 hours and an ocean. I woke to my phone shrieking alive, push alerts like hail. Valentina had been papped leaving an after-party at 4 a.m., half falling into a car, and the headline married her to the word love triangle and the word married producer and the word mystery. I'd handled enough of her PR to know what came next. The agency would call me, my boss would want me to be available, everyone would want to know if I could make a statement about privacy in hard times. They did. I wrote a draft in my head before my feet touched the floor. And then Jamie's second phone buzzed inside the pantry like a trapped wasp. I opened the door. 3 messages. V, don't go outside. L, you don't have to perform a brave man for anyone. And from an unknown number with a country code that made my stomach fall through itself, your secrets are heavy. Put them down. I made coffee like it could anchor time. Jamie came out of the shower like a man who either hadn't heard or had decided to pretend he hadn't. He kissed my cheek and his mouth tasted like mint and Endgame. "We need to talk," I said, and he said, "I know," and for a ridiculous 2 seconds I convinced myself we meant the same thing, us, the kitchen, the oranges. He picked up his second phone, which he no longer bothered to hide, and read the screen like a weather report. "Val's in trouble," he said. Val, like we were all old friends. She'll be fine, I said, professional and feral at once. He looked at me then, really looked, and there was a flicker of something I could name, shame or the ghost of it. I never meant to, he started, and I put my palm up like a traffic sign. Another woman I could out-argue, I said. Another person I could outplan. But both? And the one who remains a rumor even to me? That's not an accident. That's architecture. You can't unhear yourself say a sentence like that. It rings in the air like a bell and everything afterward has to answer it. He's Saturday. He told me he loved me, which I believed, which made things worse, and that he was lost in a chord, which is the kind of thing men say when they want their selfishness to sound like poetry. He told me that Val made him feel like he could be someone newly named and that Locke made him feel like he didn't need a name at all. I asked if either of them knew about me beyond the polite wife imagined as furniture. He said yes to one, no to the other. He didn't specify which. Pick a stake, I said. Pick a story. Pick a door. I don't have the bandwidth for an anthology. I wish I could summarize the next hour into tidy lines and bullet points. I tried. I asked for dates, he gave me metaphors. I asked for fidelity, he offered me sincerity. It's not the same currency. I told him to leave. Not forever, just to give me space to UN spaghetti my brain. He left with a backpack and some clothes and a look I recognized from hospital corridors, the bargain expression of a person asking for indulgence they didn't earn. I didn't cry then. I put on a black dress and went to work because that's what I know how to do, triage other people's fires to keep my hands from striking flint. I sat in a war room with a whiteboard and wrote sentences about respecting privacy and reminding people that humans are allowed to be messy as long as they buy concert tickets. I wrote them well. My boss patted my shoulder. The agent sent heart emojis like apologies. Valentina rang me directly and said thank you with a voice that held exactly no triumph. He wasn't yours to keep, she said quietly, and I couldn't tell whether she meant Jamie or Locke. I'm not a cloak, I said. I'm not a witness protection program for men who want to believe in earthquakes. We were silent for a long time. I'm sorry, she said. Me too, I said, and meant it. Locke texted me that night from an unknown account that hid its accent behind its, "You don't know me. You don't owe me kindness. But if you ever want to know how our songs end, I'll send you the last verse." It should have made me furious. It made me tired. I didn't reply. I put their message in the folder named Kitchen. I watered the rubber plant I'd been neglecting, and it looked at me like a thing that knows survival as a hobby. The scandal lasted 9 days because the world is busy. The sponsor stayed for now. The fandom split into predictable houses, those who wanted an apology and those who wanted a love story with improved lighting. Jamie moved into a friend's spare room. Eva came over with cheap rosé and almonds and the kind of playlist that lets you cry between tracks without losing the thread. I washed the sheets. I bought new pillows because sometimes reinvention begins with down. The second phone went quiet in the pantry like a stunned moth. I put it in a showbox, then put the showbox in the whole cupboard behind winter scarves and a version of me that wore them confidently. Weeks passed. I was fine in the way that passes for fine. I ate. I sent invoices. I slept like a person learning how. Sometimes I wanted to message Val the photo that had arrived without a sender and ask her who'd taken it, not to accuse, just to connect the dots for a geometry that had turned my mouth to chalk. I didn't. Instead, I went to the park. I sat on a bench. I watched people pass with dogs who didn't know about press releases. A woman ran by with a hoodie the color of storms, and for a second my heart did the old sprint. It wasn't them. My body needed a class in de-escalation. I did hear from Locke again. A voice note, actually, a small sound that began with ambient city and a breath. "This is not your job," they said, voice low, almost androgynous. "But you've been doing it anyway, holding the center. You don't need to be the floor. You get to be a door." I hated that the sentence landed. I hated that they sounded kind. I saved it and never played it again. As for Jamie, We met once in a cafe that makes mediocre scones and excellent eye contact. He looked thinner, like a man who had converted appetite into analysis. He said sorry the way boys are taught, earnest, insufficient. He said Lark had left the city. He said Val was in Europe. He said he had been enchanted by multiplicity, which I wrote down on a napkin to remind myself why poetry needs editors. I told him the truest thing I knew: I could forgive you for one person. I can't forgive you for a crowd. He nodded. We cried separately while pretending not to. We hugged in that polite way people do when they are returning borrowed bodies. I left the cafe and stood at the curb and felt like someone had taken my name off a guest list I never wanted to be on. You want me to say what happened to them? The celebrity kept being a celebrity. The mysterious stranger kept being a mystery, which is its own brand. The husband kept being a person with two hands and a new therapist. I kept being a woman who writes things and sometimes believes them. We didn't torch each other's futures. We didn't send group texts with knives. We did the adult thing: we moved our houses 2 streets apart on a map and pretended that was distance. But here's the part one didn't expect: relief arrived disguised as boredom. I woke one Saturday and it was raining, the kind of rain that makes you narrate your breakfast. I put on a sweater that wasn't trying to impress anyone. I walked to the markets and bought plums from the woman with the gap in her teeth who always tells me jokes about peaches. On the way home, a busker was playing a song that had soundtracked my engagement party. I waited to be wrecked and wasn't. I kept walking. Somewhere between the florist and the newsagent, a thought arrived uninvited and sat down on my shoulder. I don't need a triangle. I need a circle, me in the middle, drawing a radius I choose. I started swimming again at dawn because laps make you honest. I messaged my father to tell him I finally fixed the leaky tap he'd always promised to fix when he visited. I took a ceramics class with Eva and made 3 bowls that look like they survived an earthquake, and I love them like children. I stopped going to events where people clap at names. I kept working because work is what I know, but I set a rule: no more statements that tell lies about love for money's comfort. People can be messy without me laundering the mess into a brand. Months later, on a warm night that smelled like mango skins and bus exhaust, I sat in the cheap seats at a show I'd bought a last-minute ticket for and watched a band that owed me nothing. On stage, under considerate light, Valentina came on for a surprise duet. The room moved like a creature with one spine. She sang with the clarity you get from having lost your appetite for pretending. Halfway through the song, she looked up to the balcony, not at me, I'm not special, but at the idea of women in rows forgiving themselves for believing in men who wanted to be the plot. The lyric that caught me wasn't complicated: we loved badly. We loved loud. We live anyway. I cried and didn't stop myself. No one on either side of me minded. The woman on my left passed me a tissue without commentary, which is what mercy looks like in public. I can tell you how it ends, though it doesn't, not really. Jamie sent a photo of a beach I didn't recognize with a message that said, "I'm learning to be still." I wrote back, "Me too," and then I blocked the thread again because stillness for me doesn't include waiting for my screen to light up with old ghosts. Val's team asked if I wanted to consult on a campaign about radical accountability. I said no because I am suspicious of any adjective that tries to spoon-feed virtue. Lark posted a song under someone else's name, that's the rumor, and I didn't try to verify it. I made a stew. I texted my sister a meme. I watered the rubber plant and it didn't die. I slept with the window open. Sometimes making peace with your own life is less like a press conference and more like learning to make pancakes for one without crying into the batter. I still keep a folder named Kitchen. It has the photograph, the voice note, a printout of a headline that once made my stomach drop. I don't open it. I keep it to remind myself that I can carry a story and also set it down. When I pass doorways now, I look for reflections and I smile at the idea that somewhere a person is standing just outside the frame of someone else's life, deciding whether to step in. I hope they do if they're brave and stay if they're kind. I hope, for their sake and ours, that they choose one song at a time. And if I wake one night, as I do still, and feel the old ache gnaw like a quiet animal, I sit up and make tea and write a sentence like this one. I didn't need a headline to tell me who I was. Then I cross it out and write a new one. I learned to be my own audience. When the kettle clicks, I pour, I breathe, I whisper thank you to a room that holds my mess without asking for a quote, and I let the rain negotiate with the windows until morning decides to show up, unannounced, like a friend who brings fruit and leaves the bowl.